Welcome, welcome, welcome to everyone here. I'm Mark Gilfix. This is Michael Gilfix with me. It is our privilege and our pleasure to present here today in partnership with the Avenida Center here in Palo Alto. We want to thank Tracy and Paula Paula Wolfson, who I think is also in the audience here today, for helping to make this happen. It's, again, always a privilege to connect with this wonderful community. And I think, needless to say, we live in some chaotic and uncertain times. There's a lot that is swirling around, a lot of scary stuff in the news, a lot of unprecedented stuff in the news. And we want to go through some key issues that you need to understand and identify some steps you can take to protect your family amidst all this uncertainty. That's what we are here to do. I'm going to dive into our PowerPoint here. What are we here to talk about? We're here to talk about multi-generational planning to protect yourself and your family. Again, we want to thank the Avenida Center for having us here today. We're going to cover a lot. But before we dive in, I want you to take just a moment to think about what are the issues that brought you here today? Why did you sign up? Why did you take time out of your schedule to join us here today or to watch this webinar? What are the questions that are on your mind? Is it some version of these questions? You're worried about your finances? You're worried about your taxes? You're worried about the cost and the quality of long-term care you might get or a loved one might get? Do you just feel overwhelmed? And that's what we're here to talk about. Yeah, we don't need to bring this up again, but we do live in unprecedented times. The stock market's been on this wild ride this year. We have a pandemic raging. We've had wildfires sweeping the state of California. There's a lot going on. And oh, by the way, you may have missed this, but I think there's a little election that's happening right now. People are voting as we speak. And one of the biggest elections in American history when you look at the different paths that we might take. So lots happening. I think the key point is we are here to help. So Mike and I are here to break down some key issues and some legal tools that we think everybody needs to understand. And these are all ways to take control in your life and to provide for a prosperous future for yourself and your family. So as we dive in even more, take a moment to picture your image of retirement. Maybe if you are retired, what was the image you had before you retired? Or maybe it's the image you have now. If you're not retired yet, what do you think of when you think of a prosperous retirement? Probably some version of this. Maybe not this, maybe different, but it's probably, sailing in the Mediterranean or the Pacific Ocean or the Caribbean, or maybe it's hiking, or maybe it's spending time with family. We all have images of what we want when we're done with work. I certainly do. The reality is a little bit different. I want to just get us on the same page when we think about risks. Most of us, if not all of us, have insurance in different areas of our life. We take time, we spend money each month, each year to protect ourselves against certain risks. And what types of risks are we guarding against? Well, if you have a house, you probably have insurance against fires and other catastrophes. The reality of having an actual fire affect your house is about 3 in 1,000. Now, obviously, that's a little bit different in certain areas of California right now. It's kind of a crazy time for that. But historically speaking, the risk of a house fire really causing serious damage to your house is about 3 in 1,000, about 0.3%. And yet, most of us have some form of insurance to protect against that. We think about that. We put money into that. Driver's insurance, car insurance, auto insurance. We all have that. You have to have it. But most of us pay probably more than we need to get coverage beyond just the minimums. But what are the odds of getting into a very serious accident? Well, really about 23 in 1,000, about 2.3%. Again, an area we all spend time and money thinking about and protecting against. Let's think about an area where not many of us do put money in or put time in to plan against, and that's long-term care. And yet, the statistics are pretty staggering. The odds that you will need some form of long-term care after the age of 65 are 70%, 700 in 1,000. Massive compared to these other areas. And yet most of us don't spend much time thinking about this or planning for this. And that's one of the key topics we want to talk about. This is just a reality. So Mike, any thoughts you'd add here?
Well, let's actually go to the next slide because it really gets the PowerPoint. It really gets into the focus of the day. There are countless issues we could address. Our focus, in a way, is on the cost of long-term care, kind of the reality, the reality that we all face. I'm part of that over 65 crowd, so I certainly think about these things. And when we look at this, I guess I do want to emphasize a couple of things, that it isn't isolated out as long-term care. The thinking in this regard is always, how does it fit a plan? You know, how does it fit with your trust? How does it fit with your durable power of attorney? These things have to fit together. They have to be congruent and mutually reinforcing. So it isn't like, oh, gee, you know, need long-term care, look at Medi-Cal. If you're doing that, we can do that. But, you know, ideally, we're saying right now, what does your trust say? How does it take this possibility into account? Are you putting the necessary pieces of the puzzle in place so that when these issues come up? So, you know, nobody wants to lose the bulk of the estate for the cost of long-term care or anything else. I mean, nobody does. And, you know, I think now's as good a time as any to mention, are we thinking more about protecting assets, or maybe thinking more about the family? Yeah, so ignore what you see in front of you. I'm just going to give everybody a little wonderful update. Yesterday, Mark's sister, Jamie, gave birth to a beautiful 7-pound, 2-ounce boy, the first of our kids to have a child. So it was, you know, very exciting. So are we thinking about these things a little bit more than usually? Yeah, heck yes, we are. You know, every webinar we give is timely, but I'll tell you, you know, we're very excited, and we just sort of feel viscerally how important this is. You know, this is something that everybody needs to think about. A lot of grandparents are watching this webinar. So, you know, again, we're thinking about protecting you, your kids, and we really are always thinking in our planning about the grandkids. That's the idea of multi-generational planning. So,
yeah, and by the way, we're going to take
does that.
we're going to take questions at the end. So please submit them in the Q&A function, and we will address as many as we can at the end. We're going to try to get through a lot here today, so we're not going to stop for many questions during the presentation. But again, please keep track of them, and we'll get to as many as we can as we get to the end of our hour.
So as indicated, I mean, it's important to have a sense of the numbers. The cost can be enormous, easily $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 a year. We have truly seen cases where the cost of long-term care, where somebody needed help at home 24/7, over $500,000 a year. I mean, that's reality. That usually doesn't happen with the $500,000. It often does happen with $150,000. So, you know, again, the numbers are very real. We have to think about them. That's one of our introductory messages.
I want to dive into some mysteries. We're going to uncover these as we go through our presentation. A tale of protecting the residents, two different families. Lena and Helen, think of them as being in the exact same situation at the beginning. Both of them own homes worth well over $1 million, no debt on the homes. Both of them need long-term care. They take different approaches using equity in their home to pay for long-term care. Because they take different approaches, we have very, very different outcomes. Lena owned her home, used the equity in her home to pay for home care. As a result, her family ended up losing about $600,000. Helen, on the other hand, also owned her home, also used equity to help pay for home care. Nothing lost. $600,000 saved for Helen, for the kids, and for the grandkids. What's the difference? Why does one family lose $600,000? Why does the other family save it?
So now let's look at Paul and Greg. This situation involved life insurance policies. So many of you have life insurance, okay? So how do we think about it? How do we deal with it? In these two examples, Paul had a policy, $500,000 death benefit. It had cash value of about $60,000. Greg had a policy a little bit smaller, death benefit, as you see, $380,000, $40,000 cash value. Now, what they had in common is they both stopped making the annual premium payments. Now, what happened with Paul? His policy was lost, did him no good, evaporated. Greg's policy, smaller policy, it ended up paying for his health care, for his long-term care. How can this be? this is one of the mysteries we're going to address a little bit later on.
Let's talk about the costs of care. There's different categories. Because long-term care is a very broad term, right? There's no one type of long-term care. And when we talk about this in your mind, when we say long-term care, that just means some sort of ongoing support that you need or a loved one needs that's not going to go away. You know, if you break your leg and you need to go to the hospital for a few days to rehabilitate, that's not long-term care because you're going to heal, you're going to get to go home, and you're going to be back to your normal life. Long-term care just refers to situations where on an ongoing basis, you or a loved one's going to need support. And that type of support is a very broad spectrum. So let's explore the different categories, broadly speaking, that we're talking about. Home care. So again, this just means you're getting care at home. It could be a loved one taking care of you, or it could be a professional. The costs can range dramatically. $2,000 a month to $10,000 a month or more. We have several clients who get 24/7 care at home. That can be $15,000, $20,000 a month, depending on what they need at home. Other people just get a couple hours of help per day. There's a whole spectrum. And if you have a loved one who's there, well, there's a cost associated with that as well. You might not have to pay them, but they're taking time out of their lives to take care of you or to take care of a loved one. They can't earn money from other sources. So that cost can be really high. Residential care or assisted living. So this is, again, a broad category of communities or facilities where you might live, where it can range from living totally independently, just in a community that's geared towards people in a certain age group, or it can involve care that approaches really nursing home care, where you get 24/7 support. The cost here, again, $3,000 a month, very low end, to $10,000 a month or more. And as Mike said, the clients of ours who were spending over $500,000 a year on care were actually in an assisted living facility. I think they were at here near Palo Alto. And then, of course, the last category that no one ever wants is a skilled nursing facility or nursing homes. That's where you just need 24/7 care. Often this is something that families face when a loved one has Alzheimer's or dementia, and they just need 24/7 support, and they need physical help. The cost of nursing homes, minimum $8,000 a month, but it can be up to $16,000 a month per person or more. So these costs can be staggeringly high, and this is why we think it's so important to understand what you can do ahead of time to plan for this, and what you can do to protect assets if you face some of these expenses. There's a lot that can be done. There's no magic silver bullet, but there's a lot that can be done.
So let's lay one really important myth to rest. It's still the case that, according to polls, 60% of those of us over the age of 60 believe that Medicare is going to pay for the cost of long-term care. It's going to pay for nursing home bills. It's going to take care of us. It doesn't. It doesn't. In limited circumstances, there's limited coverage, but it just does not pay the ongoing cost of care. So, this is so important, because if you believe this, you're not going to plan. You're not going to think about structuring your estate to pay out of your own pocket. You're not going to think about long-term care insurance. You're not going to think about Medi-Cal, the program we'll be talking about today to some extent. So again, drink that in. Medicare is not a source of payment for the cost of long-term care.
That's right. Another mystery to explore some of these issues. Lois had a $100,000 estate, had to go to a nursing home. William also had to go to a nursing home. Lois had only $100,000. She basically had to go broke before she was able to get any help from the Medi-Cal program. William, on the other hand, had a $4 million estate, 40 times bigger than Lois's. He had to go to a nursing home, and Medi-Cal paid for virtually everything, and almost everything William had was protected. He didn't have to go broke. How can this be? What's the mystery here? I think we've uncovered some mysteries. We've explored some mysteries. We think the biggest mystery is why 90% plus of the US population doesn't get answers to these fundamental questions and issues. That's the real mystery to us. And there's a real cost to waiting and to not planning ahead, not having the right estate plan in place, not understanding these issues. Because again, over 70% of us are going to need this, which basically means every family in America in some way has to deal with this. And we are here to empower you and to educate you and your family to be ready for that vibrant future, because there are tools out there. So we just want to take a moment to introduce ourselves. Many of you may know us already. For those of you who do, good to see you again, or hope hope you could, good for us to sort of see you. We can't really see you. But for those of you who don't know us, I'm going to take a moment to introduce my co-presenter. So I've known Michael Gilfix for over 40 years now, because he's my dad, if that's not obvious. But I wanted to spend a couple moments giving you letting you know about Mike's background, because it's pretty unique and pretty special. So he's from a little town in Michigan, East Tawas. It's on Lake Huron. He came out to California to go to Stanford University. He graduated as an undergraduate and then graduated from the Stanford Law School in 1973. He stayed at Stanford. And when he graduated in 1973, he wanted to change the world and help people. He didn't want to go to a big law firm or big corporation just to make as much money as he could. He wanted to change the world. So he didn't know how to do that. He was a true social entrepreneur. When you're an entrepreneur, you don't just build something, you look for a problem to solve, and then you build something to solve that problem. So he looked for communities that were underserved who needed help. And he identified two: older Americans, the elderly, and Americans with disabilities. And so he basically went out and built organizations and helped to create the field of elder law. He created America's first free legal aid program for the elderly, SALA, Senior Adults Legal Assistance. It still exists today in Santa Clara County. He started the Disability Law Center in 1976, I think it was. And he quite literally was on the ground floor in creating this field that we now call elder law. We know this because he actually owned the trademark for the term elder law, which he ended up donating to one of the many organizations that he started. But he didn't just start the organization here. He trained attorneys around the country. He raised money. He proselytized. He is responsible directly and indirectly for countless free legal aid programs around the country, helping older Americans. He helped shape the field of law, and again, has helped thousands and thousands of Americans with free legal services through all the work that he did. In 1983, he transferred into private practice because he had a growing family. He realized he needed to pay some bills, especially living in Silicon Valley. But he held on to his core values of giving back and educating. Through the 80s and 90s and 2000s, he's continued to be a leader. He's trained hundreds and hundreds of other attorneys. He's written countless books. He's been quoted in national media. He's been on the radio. It's been really impressive. He also has been a top 10 national 5K runner in his age group. I think most importantly, though, especially for those of us in the Palo Alto area, he coached all of my little league teams and my sister's softball teams and basketball teams. I don't know how he found the time, but he did. And here's some proof. This is the 1990 Alto Realty Little League team here in Palo Alto. I am in the bottom left, and that's Mike in the top right. None of us in this picture made the major league, so don't look for any future Hall of Famers here, sad to say. But we did have a good year that year. So anyway, Mike somehow found time to be a part of the community in so many different ways. So without further ado, let me introduce Michael Gilfix.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I admit it, I never tire of being reminded of all of these things. And before I introduce Mark, I always like to mention the fact that when I created Senior Adults Legal Assistance, SALA, which still comes to Avenidas in 1973, where did I go? I went down to the Senior Center, then existing in Palo Alto. And at that time, believe it or not, the Senior Center was one desk in the downtown library. One woman, Diana Steeples, was the staff. One person, one desk. It was like nothing. So to create this new organization, no committees, no city council, we just decided to start doing it, and we did it. And then we created a nonprofit, and the rest is wonderful history. So the roots here in Palo Alto, not just because we live here, but because we started the work here. They're very deep, and it's very, very personal for us to serve this community. Okay, about Mark. Okay, so Mark also went to Stanford undergraduate, and his major was what's called management, science, and engineering, which is perfect for Silicon Valley. It's a combination of learning programming, understanding how those systems work, and business. The science and the business of really makes our communities go here. When he graduated, he, not by luck, by capability, he was hired by one of the top international management consulting firms in the world, and he worked with them for quite a number of years. And he was an advisor, a consultant to Fortune 500 companies, to the Department of Defense. And you can imagine the kind of expertise and the worldview that you gather from that on the macro level, which really fits nicely with the micro level that we do for our clients here in our community. When Mark was doing all of this, he decided to go to law school, and he went to Loyola. It was the only night program available, and it's a great law school. Graduated at the top of his class. He was chosen as class speaker. which is a real privilege and an honor. And his topic was generosity. Now, how perfect is that? Mark has since really distinguished himself. He's won a couple of awards at the national level as a writer and a speaker. He is co-author of a couple of our key books, one on the cost of long-term care, facing the reality of long-term care. So Mark is doing a lot of writing, a lot of leading, and just creating. So it's a wonderful thing to observe. And it's very important because we talk about multi-generational planning. We are multiple generations. You know, we live it, we breathe it. And having that second generation perspective, it's invaluable. It helps guide the way that we do our work. So again, welcome to Mark. It's a kick to be able to do this with him, as you can all imagine. So
yeah, well, thank you. And let's keep it moving. And we have a lot to cover. So, and this is like a fun piece of trivia.
I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry.
Let me say, yeah, we can keep moving.
Mark became an actor in addition to everything else. He was on a couple of national television shows, lead in some films, and here he was in competition to get this commercial for Apple, and Mark introduced Siri to the world. Here's Mark running along the Embarcadero. This commercial was on millions of computer screens all over the world. So he met literally millions of people. Not his name, but there he is introducing Siri to the world. I mean, that's a powerful act, huh?
Well, yes, my small piece of my acting history connecting to Silicon Valley. And
right.
Apologize for any Siri-related issues you've had. I didn't create it. I just helped publicize it. It still doesn't work so well for me.
But it's getting there. So last couple of introductory things now about long-term care. You know, it's really important to emphasize the fact that there is no one solution for you. I mean, it depends on your individual circumstances. It's like when you have a trust. If you have a vanilla trust that was just sort of printed out without somebody really talking with you in depth, it's probably not right for you. Now, everybody's different. Every family circumstance is different. So it's a matter of figuring out, talking with you, getting to know you, understanding your goals and your fears and your needs, and coming up with a plan, which includes long-term care, which includes tax planning, which includes planning for the next generations, all of these things, special needs, and developing, again, a plan that's multi-generational and works for you. So we can't overemphasize the need to take a fresh look at planning you might have done many years ago, fine-tuning it, making sure it's right. It's obvious once you think about it. So think about it. And, you know, this is something, I mean, I've heard this hundreds of times. So this is a nice illustration that so many estate plans sort of assume, they make a number of assumptions. Many people will say this, you know, I don't care what it costs. I'm staying home. No nursing home for me. Now, if that's your view, you want to be independent. You want to be in your own environment. You view this as integral to the cost of, to quality of life. Well, you normally also think about, you don't want to go bankrupt, but you're willing to. So the point here is that your planning documents need to say this. Implicitly, most vanilla documents, frankly, say the opposite. They say protect assets. The opposite of spend what it takes to keep me at home and keep me safe. And this can be expensive. So your family, the people given a responsibility in your plan, they need to know this is one of your goals and respond to it with appropriate planning steps. It's not obvious. It takes focus and it takes sophistication. Mm-hmm. So critical, absolutely critical as you go forward. And, you know, again, I dropped my information about our new grandchild. You do think about things a little bit differently that way, huh? I mean, it just, not an awakening because we think about these things all the time, but you know, our residence, our home, preserving our home for our family, you know, that's what generated Prop 13 going back so far. You want to protect your home for your kids and those perfect grandkids, right? I mean, there's nothing like them. So, so again, how is that done? How does that fit with planning for long-term care, with tax planning, with everything? Our job is to figure that out for you.
So let's revisit the mystery that we explored earlier, Lena versus Helen. Again, both of them own a home in this area worth well over $1 million. Both of them need long-term care. Both of them use equity in their homes to pay for long-term care, but go about it in very different ways. And as a result, Lena and her family really ends up losing $600,000. Helen also uses her home to pay for long-term care or equity in her home with her family, and they lose nothing. Why is this? So as we explore this, I want to introduce you to the latest iteration of Tom Selleck. You may remember Tom from such shows as Magnum PI and several other long-running TV shows and movies. But his most recent role that I've seen him in is in reverse mortgage commercials. I literally saw him say, "I'm Tom Selleck and I wouldn't be pitching this if I didn't absolutely believe in this. There is really no downside to this." And I'm sure he believes that. And we don't mean to throw home equity brokers under a bus or anything. There are situations where they can make sense, but there's a whole lot of situations where they don't make sense. Now, why is that? Well, look, let's explore these situations. Lena and Helen, let's say it's $1 million house. They bought them 30 years ago for $50,000 each or less. So basically have over $1 million in equity. If you get a reverse mortgage, you get money based on the equity in your home, and it's not really due to be paid back for a long time. You think, oh, it's free money. I own the home. I'm going to eventually maybe sell it anyway. What's the big deal? The problem is if you get a reverse mortgage and if you have to move out of your house, again, 70% of us will need long-term care, and many of us will not be able to stay at home when that happens. You just might need a higher level of support. It might not make sense to be in your big home with lots of stairs. You move out, what happens? A clock starts ticking. And for every home reverse mortgage I've heard of, there's at most a 1-year time period. If you're out of your house for a year or more, that loan becomes due. You got to pay it back. If you have to pay it back, how are you going to do that? If it's a bigger loan, well, you obviously don't have cash to pay it back, or you wouldn't have needed the loan in the first place. So you almost certainly have to sell your house. What happens if you sell your house? Well, capital gains tax. That's a massive issue. So in Lena's case, she moved out. She had to sell her house to pay back the reverse mortgage. She faced over $300,000 in capital gains taxes because it was in her estate. You just have to pay that. It's on the gain in the value of your house from what you purchased it for to what you sold it for. You do have a $250,000 exemption if it's your residence, but there's still a lot of exposure for most people in this area who've owned their house for a long time, hundreds of thousands. And then she had to go to a nursing home. Well, we're going to talk about some of the rules around Medi-Cal and the types of assets that are protected, the types that aren't. A home is exempt. You can own a very valuable home and still get Medi-Cal benefits. If you sell it, you have a bunch of cash. Cash is not exempt. So Lena had to then spend most of that money that was left after she sold the house and after she paid back the loan until she was basically broke. And only then did Medi-Cal step in. So she and her family ended up losing, again, over $600,000. Let's just compare that to Helen. Long story short, Helen talked to us. She didn't get a reverse mortgage. And in this case, she had adult children who could step in and help. And maybe they co-signed on a home equity line of credit or a different type of setup where they used equity in the home to get access to money, but they didn't have that ticking clock. If Helen had to move out, they could rent the house out to generate income to pay off the other loans. There was no 1-year limit after which the loan had to be paid back. So as a result, the home doesn't have to be sold. It's in Helen's estate until she passes away. It goes to the kids. If a home is in your estate when you pass away, your family gets the benefit of a step up in basis, meaning your family can sell it later and all those capital gains taxes that you would have had to pay, they vanish. They're gone. $300,000 saved off the top. She also held on to this house. All the value of the house doesn't count against Medi-Cal eligibility. So when she went to a nursing home, she only had an exempt asset. Medi-Cal started to help pay for her long-term care in a nursing home right away, saving another $300,000. So there's no one-size-fits-all situation here. But the point is you need to be educated, and especially before you think about selling your house or getting a reverse mortgage, talk to us. Let's make sure your documents are up to date. Let's make sure you understand the different options. They're not there for everybody, but these can be massive, massive deals when you look at the value you can pass along to your family and you can save for yourself.
So let's go back to the life insurance example of Paul and Greg. Remember that mystery? Okay, let's solve it. Okay, so remember, Paul and Greg both had life insurance policies. They both stopped making the premium payments. So for Paul, the policy just evaporated, did him no good. How did Greg's policy pay for the cost of care? Okay, so this is what happened. Okay, let's go to the next. There we go. So what Paul did is he just stopped paying it. His policy lapsed. If you stop paying, you'll get some notices and reminders, but if you just simply stop, the policy disappears. The insurance company loves it. They collected your premiums and they don't have to pay anything off. Now, what Greg did is he talked to us, and we're not the only ones who know about this. Many do, of course. What he did is he was educated and he learned that there's something called a life settlement. And basically that means that he could, sounds a little odd, but he could sell his life insurance policy. So think about this. If somebody can buy your $380,000 life insurance policy for, in this case, $112,000, remember, the cash value was dramatically less. But if those who invest in your policy pay this much and then they collect $380,000 within a couple of years, they're going to make a heck of a return. They're going to make money on the deal. So what happens with these things is when you have a life insurance policy in a situation like this, there's a market out there. There are companies that will bid to basically take over your life insurance policy. So rather than turning his policy in and getting the cash value, and certainly rather than letting it lapse, what he did is he went out to the secondary market, and the gentleman we work with found a company that was willing to pay him $112,000, like almost a third of the value of the policy. And he collected $112,000. The company took over the death benefit. He didn't care. The $112,000 made the difference. That let him pay for the cost of home care for the rest of his life. It was an amazing outcome. So if you have a life insurance policy with any cash value, you virtually never want to surrender it. You certainly never want to just let it lapse. Talk to us so we can send you to somebody who understands how these policies are effectively sold to give you an enormous amount, well, who knows how enormous, more money than you would have gotten otherwise, and it doesn't cost you anything. That's the wonderful thing about it. So radical difference depending on what you know and where you go for information.
Yeah, and talk to us if you have this question. We have a couple experts that we work with who live and breathe this stuff. Let's explore another mystery that we introduced before. Remember, it was Lois and William. Lois has $100,000 to her name. She has to go to a nursing home. She has to go basically broke. She has to have under $2,000 before Medi-Cal would help to pay for nursing home care. William had a $4 million estate and basically got to protect everything. And Medi-Cal helped to pay for most of the cost of nursing home care. It doesn't seem fair, but the rules are the rules. Now, why is the difference? Let's explore some of these rules really quickly. Lois didn't get advice. She burned through the $98,000 until she was down to under $2,000, and only then did Medi-Cal step in. William, on the other hand, got good advice. He kept the right mix of assets. That's the key thing. California rules are kind of crazy when it comes to eligibility for Medi-Cal, but knowing them is so powerful, and having an estate plan that addresses this, a power, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but a power of attorney and a trust that both address this type of planning is absolutely critical, and you can save so much. William did here, saved basically all $4 million. Medi-Cal ended up paying for 80% of the cost of nursing home care. So it's extraordinary here, the power of knowledge and planning ahead. And we help countless families in this area. So Mike, why don't you go through some of the rules and some of the issues people need to be aware of when it comes to Medi-Cal eligibility. And Medi-Cal is here to pay, again, for nursing home care. That's the key area.
Sure. So, in terms of objectives, we've already made these points, but let's emphasize you want to protect your home, the vast majority of us. We want to save the assets for the kids and the grandkids in a very smart way. Today, we have only limited time to talk about these things called dynasty trusts, but Mark will talk about that briefly later. So protecting assets for the family, and particularly if you have a special needs child, I mean, it's incredibly important to protect assets for the benefit of that child. So Medi-Cal is relevant in so many circumstances when you might not think that it is. So let's now take just a moment and look at the eligibility guidelines. We are not going to go through this in any depth at all. Two key points. One is that we give 2-hour webinars, seminars on this slide, on this alone, on how you can plan, what the options are. And many of you know that Mark and I co-authored a book called Facing the Reality of Long-Term Care, where we explore these issues. So that book is of course available. Now, basics. If an individual goes into a nursing home, this is a nursing home situation, she can't have more than $2,000 in countable assets. Now, countable. Many assets don't count. The residence, doesn't matter how much it's worth. In some states, it does matter. In California, any value, the home doesn't count in determining eligibility. If you have a large IRA or 401k, 500,000, a million. It doesn't count either. I mean, it's remarkable. Not the case in all states, but in California. Burial accounts, and there's other assets that don't count as well. We're not going to go through them all. Now, what if you're a married couple? What's the deal there? Really quickly. Again, the spouse in the nursing home can't have more than $2,000, but there's protections for the spouse living at home. No need to become bankrupt, okay? So the spouse at home gets to keep almost $130,000 in his or her own name, doesn't interfere with eligibility. There are income protections, minimum of about $3,200 a month for the spouse living at home, and these are minimums. We can increase these levels of protection. So there are myriad rules pertaining to gifts and the characterization of assets and the types of trust that you might set up. And knowing these rules means that we can protect assets and achieve eligibility for those wishing to do so. And let me emphasize, California rules are different from rules everywhere else in the country. You cannot look at a website about Medicaid, a national website, and find reliable information. California is an island unto itself. We understand the island inside out. So we are a reliable source of this information.
Right, and just to that point, rules can change. So if you are facing this issue, or someone you know is facing the possibility of nursing home care in the next 6 months or even a year, you may want to start the planning process now. We don't next year. We've been saying for, what have you been saying, Mike, since 2006, California could change the rules. We just haven't adopted federal rules. We have our own weird island. That could change at any point. We would probably have some warning, but if you're facing these issues, probably best to take some planning steps now rather than waiting to see what might happen in 6 months or a year at the state level, because it could change.
Yeah. So let's, again, this point just illustrates that everybody is different, and who knows what your goals are. I mean, you may want to protect your assets no matter what for the family. I want to get Medi-Cal. I want it protected. Or you may say, no, I want to stay at home, and I will spend. So it's important that, again, this bears emphasis. That's why we're doing it. Your family needs to understand this. Your doctor needs to understand it. Well-meaning physicians say, oh, she needs to be in a nursing home. It's for her own good. Well, is it really? So that's the question continually presented. And how does it come up, notwithstanding your planning? And again, the importance of being specific and integrating these issues into your planning. Well, crises come up. Let's go to the next PowerPoint. Crises happen, you fall, God forbid, dementia develops. And then best laid plans go out the window. Oh, because, he thought he'd be in good health and stay at home. That's not the case anymore. Well, that may be the case. This makes the point, no matter what your intentions are, no matter well-meaning everybody may be, the doctor says, got to be in a nursing home, and it happens. It happens all the time. There's concern often on the part of family members about the cost of care. Let's face it, reality, many kids, they have their own families, and it's human for them to think about, oh, gee, what am I going to inherit? That's an uncomfortable thought for many to even acknowledge. But it's reality. So let's acknowledge reality. And again, how do we achieve the goal of quality care where you want it while protecting assets to the extent that you want to do that? That's our goal for you, obviously. So what do you do? What are some of the obvious steps you can take? Long-term care insurance, which we didn't really get into today, it's a possibility. There are folks we work with who understand this. There's referrals available from Avenidas. It can be a very good idea. So sometimes you need to use the assets that you home. Mark talked about how to creatively and protectively use home equity so that your home isn't exposed. So again, smart ways. Your advance directive, your durable power of attorney, your trust, they need to say, again, if you want to stay at home, the documents need to acknowledge this and be consistent throughout. So what are your goals? How do we achieve those objectives on your behalf?
And your power of attorney, by the way, the durable power of attorney, which some people kind of consider to be just a secondary, almost like throwaway document, that's often the most critical document when it comes to asset protection in case you become incapacitated in the future. Critical that you address this, again, as Mike said, in your trust, and especially the power of attorney document. That's something that absolutely warrants a fresh look if it's been a while since you looked at that or if you don't have one. We'll talk about that in just a moment too. But I think as we talk about this, every situation is different. We are a multi-generational firm. We believe that the presumptive approach that attorneys should take with families should be multi-generational. And we know that's actually not the approach that most attorneys take. Most attorneys take the very traditional role of, you are my client, your kids are separate, we don't talk unless there's a specific reason to do that. We like to take the alternative, an alternate path. We think the presumption should be that if everybody in the family is on the same page, and if there aren't other issues, and of course some families have issues where this doesn't work, but if there aren't issues, let's coordinate, let's communicate, let's talk about this, and let's see how we can integrate planning. That can mean different things in different families. We've written articles about this. We've spoken at national legal conferences about this to train other attorneys in ways that they can better serve families in this regard. This is big about, this is what we do and who we are. Again, doesn't work for everybody. And if you don't have kids, obviously it's a different type of situation. We can help you there too. But critical to talk to your kids and include them in whatever way makes sense. Different for everybody. And when we talk about asset protection, and we're going to talk a little bit about estate taxes just briefly, the next generation has to be involved, or there's very little you can do. You got to talk to them. You got to include them in this process. And it also matters for your quality of care. Let's forget saving assets. They need to know what you want and how to pay for that. So there are a lot of ways we can help. You know, we've saved families millions and millions of dollars. We haven't kept track, but it's probably in the hundreds of millions at this point that we've saved local families in unnecessary costs and expenses. So we want to help you think this through in a comprehensive way. We're going to take just a moment briefly. We gave another webinar where we explored these in more detail. That's on our website, by the way, and you can contact us or the Avenidas team to get a link to that. But these are the critical documents you have to have up to date. Your revocable living trust. There's a few different structures you might have used a few years ago that no longer make sense. Depending on what happens in the election, it may make sense to make another change. You know, it may need some sort of stay-at-home provision. Your durable power of attorney document, absolutely critical that you have that up to date. You've thought about it, you've addressed it recently. It needs to have provisions that allow for Medi-Cal planning if you can't make decisions for yourself. If it doesn't, that might be a hint that might stop your family from protecting hundreds of thousands of dollars in assets. It gets a lot harder if you haven't addressed that. Advanced Healthcare Directive for medical decision-making, making sure that you've empowered people who you trust to communicate on your behalf in a hospital setting and to make decisions for you. Talk briefly about a way you can supercharge your planning for the next generation, family protection trusts, generically known as dynasty trusts. Bottom line though is, if you've done documents before and it's been a few years, let us review your documents, especially your trust and your power of attorney. These are the two critical ones when it comes to asset protection. We absolutely can take a look. We can efficiently help you understand what they have in them, what's missing, what's not missing, how they are, and if you need to make updates. We absolutely can help you. And if you don't have these documents, of course, we can help you to put them into place. And if you're happy, you've worked with someone a long time and you want to stick with them, fine. But make sure you readdress it with them regularly. You know, laws are changing, these situations change. You want to make sure that your documents address these long-term care and asset protection issues. So on the note of my new nephew and Mike's new grandson, there are really powerful ways where you can protect assets for future generations. And I'm going to go through why you would do this. So here we're talking about, instead of, let's say you have a son and a daughter, instead of leaving money to your son and to your daughter directly, you would leave money to family protection trusts, one for your son and one family protection trust for your daughter. These are separate from your living trust. So your son and daughter wouldn't actually inherit anything. Their trust would. Now, why would you do this? Divorces, 50% or whatever of marriages end in divorce. If you leave money directly to your child and they commingle it, half of what you leave them could be lost in a divorce settlement. If you create one of these trusts, it's separate. It will not be lost in a divorce settlement. If your child's sued, car accident, business deal gone bad, whatever, if it's money in their name, fair game to litigants. If it's in one of these trusts, there's a barrier. There's a high level of protection. They have to break this trust to get to this money. It's a huge disincentive for someone to go after that money. So it's almost like an insurance policy for that. When your child passes away and the money goes to the grandkids, if the child inherits it directly, everything they inherit plus everything that they earn during their lives is part of their taxable estate. We don't know what'll happen to estate tax laws in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I suspect they're going to get tougher than they are now. If it's in one of these trusts, it's not part of their taxable estate. It can go estate tax free to the grandkids. And you might think, well, I don't want to tie my kids' hands because I don't want them to have a trust they have to deal with. Well, your kids can be their own trustees if they're responsible. So they can actually be largely in control of these assets. So extraordinarily powerful trusts that the majority of our clients have put into place. And when you look 30, 40, 50 years in the future, there's going to be a divide. The families that created these trusts for their kids and grandkids are going to be in a much better position than families that don't. Is it fair? No, but it's reality. And we're here, again, just inform you of the tools available. This is an extraordinary, extraordinary trust, and that we're always happy to talk to you more about if you have kids, and especially if you have grandkids. So I alluded to this earlier, but there is a little election coming up in just a few weeks. Many of you may have already voted. Whether you vote or not, whatever political side you're on, it's important that we understand the estate tax and how this could be affected. Right now, let's just go through some facts. The estate tax is a punishing 40% tax. Any dollar exposed to the estate tax, 40% of that dollar is going to the IRS. But under current law, very few families face this tax. There's an exemption, an amount that goes tax-free to your beneficiaries via lifetime gifts or bequests when you pass away, or a combination of the two, gifts you gave away during life or what you leave when you're gone. $11.58 million per person can go without a penny of estate or gift tax right now. So for a couple, if all the right steps are taken with an attorney after one spouse passes away, it's over 23 million that can be passed to the next generation. So yeah, some families face this, and if you do, great problem to have, and we can help you even then with planning. Notably, the receipt of an inheritance is not taxed. We get this question all the time. If a child receives an inheritance from someone, they do not have to pay income tax or any type of tax on that. There might be some changes to that law in the future, but right now there's no tax. A lot of states have state-specific estate taxes. California does not yet. That could change. California is always looking for new ways to tax us, and there was a bill introduced last year to introduce a state-level estate tax. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't get out of committee. We're keeping a close eye on that. So you might think, well, this is a huge number. I'm not close to 23 million or 12 million. But first of all, your estate is probably larger than you think. If you own a house in this area, it's probably worth over $2 or $3 million. That's just the reality of the peninsula. Your taxable estate includes retirement accounts, life insurance. A lot of people forget about that. Property in other countries, other states. So your estate is probably significantly larger than you think. I think, Mike, what's the estimate? When people give us numbers, we usually add 20% to it.
Yeah,
and that's
usually very consistent.
Yeah, unless you're an engineer and you come in with a detailed spreadsheet. We have a lot of clients who come in with everything itemized, and then you're probably pretty accurate then.
Yeah, that's the engineer. We call that the engineer asterisk.
Right. All these rules should. So you might be thinking, well, I don't need to think about the estate tax. But for those of you who watched Game of Thrones, winter is coming in 2026 or sooner. Now, what do I mean by that? In 2026, if nothing happens, if there's a split government, Republicans and Democrats both in charge, they don't touch the estate tax law at all in the next few years, on January 1st, 2026, the exemption will be cut in half. It'll go from 11.58 million to about probably 6 million per person. It's indexed to inflation, so we don't know what exactly that number would be. But that's not that far from now. It's just about 5 years from now. And if you own, again, a house in this area, right now we're in maybe a little bit of a lull, but housing prices historically have gone up pretty fast. Investments have gone up in value, or probably will in the next few years. So you might be close to this new 6 million a person number, or a lot closer to it than you think. Or if you're already over it, you definitely have an issue to deal with. And I think very importantly, depending on the outcomes of this fall's elections, these numbers could change much sooner, especially if there's one party is in control of all three houses of government, the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress. So we haven't seen many specific proposals yet from Joe Biden. There's been generic, he's put forth some generic ideas about restoring the estate tax to its historical norms, which means it's very, very possible the exemption could be reduced significantly, or maybe it just gets reduced to 6 million a person much sooner than 2026. So the bottom line is you need to be aware of this, and there are massive implications when it comes to your planning. We can help you to save a lot in estate tax exposure. There are all kinds of techniques that are available. Mike wrote a book on this, Beat Estate Tax Forever. It's available through our office, but most importantly, if you face these issues, come talk to us. There are all sorts of strategies that are totally within the rules that can save literally millions of dollars if you face these issues. But most importantly, you got to make sure that your documents and your plan is up to date. That's the critical thing, because if it's not up to date, your plan is only as strong as its weakest link. So We, of course, can help you to think about your long-term care, estate, asset protection planning needs. We can help to look at your existing documents, and if necessary, we can help you to create a new plan. And beyond that, we want to help you think comprehensively about this. We're starting to develop relationships with a few financial advisors that we work very closely with. But regardless, we can work with you and your financial advisor. We can help you to think comprehensively about this, because that's what it takes. And ideally across generations. We've helped so many families think about this in ways that they never would have otherwise, because these seem like very dry subjects. But the stakes couldn't really be much higher. And we're here to help. So as we get to the end of our hour here with you, I want to flag something. We've given you so much information. Your head might be spinning. You might be thinking like, this is too much. I think one thing we want to emphasize is overcome the 3Ds, the danger of denial and delay. We hear this all the time. I'll never need long-term care. I'll be in that 30% category. Or I already have documents. Those will be enough. I don't need to look at this. I did an estate plan in 1996. I'm good, or 2006. Or I have too much on my plate now. The world's too crazy. I'll do this later. It is a gift to have this top of mind. When things are top of mind, you're much more likely to take action. The longer you wait to take action, the less likely it is that you'll do anything. And again, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars can be at stake, and your well-being. I think this is an area where you can take some control in a world that feels like it's out of our control. So whether it's with us or someone else, take action right now. Of course, we would love the opportunity to work with you. And we want to make a special offer to everybody who took part in this for new clients, so people who aren't existing clients and who want to get to know us a little bit more. So of course, we can review your existing documents. We invite you to join our client community. If you'd like to spend just a little bit of time getting to know us a little better, and if you're not an existing client, we are happy to set up free 20-minute office hours calls or Zoom video meetings. I'm going to provide some information on how to set that up in a second. And I think the main thing is take action now. Take a fresh look. Do something while you're thinking about it. Mike, any other thoughts you'd add here?
No, I think we've said it. We would welcome chatting with everybody. We're available. It's what we do. So we look forward to it.
Right. And so if you do want to contact us, and there's no strings attached, you spend the time talking to us if you think it's worthwhile and working with us further, or setting a formal meeting for us to review your documents. Because, in the 20 minutes, we can't really do a detailed review of your documents. We can certainly go over questions you have, big picture questions or even specific questions, and identify some next steps. If you do want to dive in deeper, you can also just set a planning meeting with us where we just charge hourly, and we can dive in right away and help you identify different strategic options and weaknesses and strengths in your plan. If you want to contact us, you can call our office, 650-493-8070. You can email Ashley on our team, ashley@gilfix.com, spelled in a unique way. We also have a Calendly link. If you want to set a meeting with me, my calendar is linked to that. So you can just go on to Calendly /Gilfix/15 minutes, and you can put that, click on that, and you can actually set a meeting directly on my calendar. And I'm going to put that in the chat function in just a moment. So again, we invite you of course, to reach out to us if you'd like to. And if you're an existing client, probably a good time to reach back out to take a fresh look, especially after the election. Our calendars are already getting filled up right after the election. A lot of clients anticipating some potential changes. Again, no matter what your political views are, I think it's very possible that we'll see some big changes. Who knows? But regardless, it's important to stay on top of this. Any other notes you'd have, Mike, before we jump into some questions?
No, we're celebrating the birth of the grandchild. We're celebrating multi-generational existence. And, it's just such a wonderful reminder that, we're like everybody else. We have a family. We think about our own issues. And it's kind of a privilege to be able to help folks out with this. So
yeah,
we love it. We feel very lucky to be able to do the work that we do.
And we love connecting with people in the community. It's a privilege to get to serve so many people. We walk around my parents' neighborhood, and it's all confidential, but we can point to all the houses of people who are clients, who are also neighbors. So, we take this all very seriously. So, again, thank you guys for joining us. We're going to now jump into some questions. I'm going to put that link to Calendly in the chat function if you want to get that. We're going to get to as many questions as we can before we have to jump off. But thank you guys for joining us. So hold on just one moment. I'm going to dig in to some questions. And I'm also going to get that link for you guys here. So the first question that I am going to find, oh, here we go. So by the way, if you want to talk to SALA, Senior Adults Legal Assistance, you can call Avenidas. And so Tracy and Paula Wolfson's been a big part of all this. You can reach Paula, she can help you. You can call Avenidas at 650-289-5400. 650-289-5400. So that's one way that you can reach out to SALA and get some help. We have some questions about Prop 19 on the ballot, how it relates to Prop 58, protections for real estate. So I haven't read Prop 19 in much detail. My understanding is that it might, so Prop 58, this is law. If you, for your primary residence, plus some additional rental properties or other second properties up to a limit, those can pass to your children with no change in estate taxes. So certainly your primary residence gets
property tax.
From property tax perspective. So your Prop 13 based property taxes are probably quite low if you own your house for a while, go to the next generation with no change in property taxes. Yet another reason why you want to hold on to a house in your family if you can. Your kids get to benefit from Prop 13 as well. So Prop 19 undoes this. I think if people don't live in the home that they inherit, I haven't read it enough though to offer much additional context. Mike, any thoughts about that?
No, I think we should it's complicated. That's way beyond the scope of what we can and really should get into, because we're really trying to be apolitical on these issues, and just whatever the law is, that's what we deal with for you.
Yeah, and I see a question about just, is there a, I'm actually going to paste the Calendly link, by the way, into the chat function if you want that. So there was one, so that's in the chat function. If you want to just click and set a time with me, you can do that. You can also contact our office at gilfix.com for more information. We had a question just about a Biden tax plan, that there's been some discussion of eliminating a capital gains step up. When you pass away, everything in your state gets a step up in cost basis. We don't know. There's been very few details. Yeah, that's been thrown out, but you know, when Obama was elected, he threw out a lot of proposals that weren't even ever considered. So I think we just don't know. We have to wait. What candidates put out in policy statements often have nothing to do with what they actually put forward, because Congress really writes the laws, not the president. So there could be big changes. We're going to have to wait and see. Another question. We have questions about assisted and memory care. So good comment from Paula. Assisted and memory care costs in this area are way above $3,000 per month. Board and care costs are up. Think of these costs as minimum estimates. You know, even if the facility you're in is $3,000 or $4,000 a month, which is hard to find here, you're gonna have other costs. You know, a caregiver who comes to help out. Mike, any other thoughts just about costs and how high they can get?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about memory care units is they are often affiliated with assisted living. And I won't go through which facilities in Palo Alto, but they're all over the area. So, you know, it's assisted living and you're there. And the good thing is somebody gets to know the community there and they become a part of it. And if you need a higher level of care, often called memory care, the Magnolia unit, whatever it may be, it's a higher level of care. And many people stay there because it's comfortable. And with the rarest of exceptions, when you go to the higher level of care, akin to nursing home care in assisted living, Medi-Cal is not available, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you just need to know that. So you're typically on your own to pay for that. So again, memory care, if it's akin to a nursing home, if you stay there, you're going to pay for it. You'd have to move out to look to a Medi-Cal certified facility. Another complicated topic.
Right. Question is, do we recommend long-term care insurance? And I think the answer is, it depends. There was a time where we were not fans of long-term care insurance because it was grossly mispriced. You may have seen the news that the cost of long-term care insurance has been going up over time, and that's because insurance companies just screwed it up. They made a bunch of incorrect assumptions when they first introduced these products. They thought a smaller percentage of people would use them and for less time than turned out to be the reality. And so a lot of long-term care insurance companies were about to go bankrupt. And so the state allowed them to increase their rates. They have to get state approval to do that. So if you are thinking about it and you're maybe are about to need long-term care, it's almost certainly too late. But I remember hearing from an expert about this, that the ideal age to get long-term care insurance is like your early to mid 50s or something like that. You know, I don't know the exact details, but absolutely, in some cases, we do recommend it. We think that the industry shaked out the bad players. Costs could go up, but hey, the cost of long-term care is going up. So it's a way to get some certainty. I think it's very personal. You know, a lot of people want to self-insure and just invest that money. But if you like the idea that, hey, if I need this, there's this separate fund available to pay for care, that can be really nice. So if you have questions about that, there are a couple of long-term care insurance experts that we feel good about. We're happy to connect you with. But you know, it's part of a greater overall plan. So again, talk to your family and make sure they all understand these issues, because that's the key. And one more question, we're going to take a good one. If you create a dynasty trust or a family protection trust for your kids, does the child trustee have access to these funds? Can they use this to support themselves? Absolutely. That's the whole point of it. So that's what's so frankly magical about these trusts and why they're so extraordinary. You are not leaving money to your kids. You would create separate, again, if you had, let's say you have 2 kids, you would not leave money directly to your kids. You would create one family protection trust for child 1, one family protection trust for child 2. You leave money to these trusts. They don't inherit it directly, but they absolutely benefit from it. That's what it's there for. They are the beneficiaries of these trusts while they're alive, and they can be in charge of it. They can use trust assets to buy a house, to pay for regular expenses in life. So, but they have these protections against divorce, lawsuits, and for the grandkids, even estate taxes. So they're kind of like a prenuptial agreement for your kids and even for your grandkids, because these trusts last through the lives of your grandkids as well. So extraordinarily powerful. You know, the vast majority of our clients have chosen to add these to their plans, and we can help you with that too if you have other questions. So on that note, anything you'd add, Mike?
No. It's a wrap, and it's been a pleasure. It's been a kick.
Yeah, we actually got close to an hour. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here. You know, your time is valuable. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedules to spend it with Mike and I. We hope we can be a resource to you. Regardless, use this as an excuse to talk to your family, to talk to your advisors, and to take some steps. Take a fresh look at your plan and talk to your kids or your grandkids or your parents about these issues. They matter. And communication is so critical. There's so much we can do when we work together. So on that note, we want to thank you again. We want to thank the Avenidas team, Paula and Tracy and everyone else at Avenidas. You guys are awesome. And on that note, if you want to find us, we're easy to find, gilfix.com. The Calendly link is in the chat function. But either way, thank you so much. We hope you all stay safe and healthy and happy in these crazy times.
There we go.
Take care.
Bye-bye all.